You may not know this, but when you go to an advanced screening, sometimes you get free stuff, like keychains and pins, sometimes even like hats or t-shirts. This screening of Dr. Sleep I went to, not only did I get a free keychain, but I also got a free blanket. Look at this thing. I think I'm gonna put this on and just wear it for the review. Like that. It's so soft too. Dr. Sleep. So Dr. Sleep is the almost 40 years coming sequel to the 1980s Stanley Kubrick classic, The Shining. Both these films are of course based off of Stephen King novels. Alright, this thing's actually falling off, so I'm just gonna take it off. Now, as far as The Shining is concerned, I have not seen it too many times. The first time I watched it, I almost fell asleep. It was so slow. But when I heard the sequel was coming out, I said to myself, okay, I gotta give this movie another try, because people love it so much. So about a week ago, on October 30th, I sat down and I gave The Shining another try. And yeah, the plot is pretty cool, but it is so slow. I just can't deny that I was like, this movie is so just dragging on. And I know I often say in my reviews that I prefer movies that take their time to tell a story, but my god, The Shining took way too much time to tell its story. And Shelley Duvall's acting sucks. It just does. But the flip side is that the plot, the story it is telling, is really cool. You know, this family is in a hotel and it's looking after the hotel, and then the dad slowly goes insane because this hotel is like haunted. It's like a weird, creepy magic hotel or something. So it turns out the dad goes insane. The little boy has psychic powers called The Shining. So now in Dr. Sleep, the little boy, Danny Torrance, is all grown up now and he's played by Ewan McGregor. There is a group of people led by Rebecca Ferguson. They feed off people with these psychic shining powers by basically sucking the life out of them. So now adult Dan Torrance teams up with this younger girl named Abra Stone, who also has these shining powers, and they're gonna try to deal with this whole cult situation. And now we have our sequel to The Shining. And I will say, if you are a fan of the Kubrick classic, I'm pretty sure you're gonna like this movie. Because like its predecessor, this movie is so slow. It is. I mean, this is a 2.5 hour long movie. Just by that and the fact that this movie is a sequel to The Shining, you can assess that this movie is going to be a slow burn. And it is in fact a slow burn. But once again, the flip side of that is that the plot is really cool. And you got an awesome cast in this movie. I mean, Ewan McGregor is probably one of my favorite actors at this point. Dude crushes it in this movie. Dan Torrance is still traumatized by the events he went through when he was 5. The way he deals with it I thought was really interesting, because he wants to put all that behind him, you know, as any normal human being would. But as he said in the trailer, the things come back. They are still haunting him as an adult, so he has to take action. And he feels that he can do that by helping out this kid. Her name is Abra Stone. Yeah, like Abra. She's played by child actress Kylie Curran, and this just in, she is really good. Like, I would say she was the standout of this whole movie, but I don't want to take any of the spotlight away from Ewan McGregor, or Rebecca Ferguson for that matter. But Kylie Curran does have a lot of screen time in this movie. She's one of the main characters. She's carrying a lot of weight on her shoulders as an actress, and the character herself is carrying a lot of weight on her shoulders. And she did a really great job. You really sympathize with the character. She gets the emotions across. When she looks terrified, you totally buy it. And there were a couple points where she had to be brave, and I bought that too. Like, at some points I was like, this kid is awesome right now, because she just pulled something off. Like, the audience was cheering. Like, it was a badass moment. It was cool to see. All sorts of props to Kylie Curran in this movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her work. And Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat. She's called Rose the Hat because she's always wearing that top hat. It's kind of weird, but fitting because she is a weird character. But she's also really good because she's so sinister in like that completely disturbing kind of way. She pretty much reminded me of a child predator, which is pretty much what she is in this movie. Like, she'll get right up in a kid's face and be like, well, hi there. Every time she said that in this movie, I was like, ugh. It was like her catchphrase. She and her cult, I thought they were some pretty frightening people. Just because the way they acted. They acted like they needed this life energy to survive. Like they were desperate for it. And you feel that, so yeah. Now, like I said, like its predecessor, The Shining, this movie is the slow burn, which means it might not be for everyone. Just like The Shining might not be for everyone. But as the story was progressing, I found myself getting more and more into it. Although I will say, if you can avoid analyzing the trailers, do that, because I feel like the trailers show way too much. So yeah, avoid them if you can. And as far as horror goes, this isn't your typical kind of horror movie. There's nothing like visually scary in this movie. It's not like It. It's really different than It. In It, you had this scary clown creature that could turn into all sorts of scary shit, which is effective, yeah. In this movie, Dr. Sleep, the horror element is not so obvious. There actually was one gross part around the beginning. One scene that was like really disturbing to watch. I was like, ugh, I don't want to see this. But other than that, the threat is not so obvious and in your face. The horror element in this movie comes from the tension, the tone, the atmosphere. Again, just like its predecessor, The Shining. And towards the end of this movie, I found myself on the edge of my seat, like surprisingly so. Like the end of the movie was building towards the climax and I was like, oh my god, like what is going on? My blood was pumping. And yeah, I gotta say, the ending really paid off. It was worth the slow burn for the first like hour and a half. Because yeah, sure it was slow, but the characters were really good, the plot was really engrossing. So by the time it got to the end, it did pick up the pace. And I was like, oh holy shit, now it's getting real. So yeah, I liked all of the plot of this movie. Just if it were more fast-paced, I would like it even more. And I know some fans of The Shining are gonna be like, no, it is just as slow-paced as it needs to be. That's what people like about The Shining. They like that it's so slow. Which, hey, to each their own. There is also a noticeable and refreshing lack of humor in this movie. I mean, there was a little bit, there were some laughs, but it's really held back, really minimal. And it was refreshing because, you know, most big movies these days, they do go for a lot of laughs, like the It movies, for example. They have more comedy in them than I feel is necessary. This movie, the audience laughed out loud maybe 5 times max, and usually it was as a sigh of relief after a really intense scene, and in that way it worked really well. But for the most part, it is a very serious movie, so just know that going in. The music in Dr. Sleep was done by the Newton brothers, who are horror movie veterans. They've done a lot of horror movies, and yeah, their score in this film was really effective. There's that heartbeat that you hear pretty much throughout the entire movie. It's like Dark Side of the Moon. Or maybe not the entire movie, but in most of the scenes, most of the intense scenes. You hear that boom, boom. Boom, boom. And of course, they brought back that Dies Irae theme from The Shining. They brought that back and the audience cheered whenever it came on because some themes are just timeless. Dies Irae, for those of you who don't know, that theme predates The Shining by many, many, many years. It is a theme that is like ancient and it was written originally to represent death. I learned that in high school. Look it up. It's actually really cool. So in the end, I think Dr. Sleep is a really good sequel to The Shining. If you like The Shining, you'll like this movie. If you love The Shining, you'll like this movie. If you don't like The Shining, you won't like this movie. Because again, if there's one word I could use to describe both movies, it would be slow. I'll be honest, there were a couple points in the first half where I almost did consider nodding off, which maybe the title is a fitting one. But then the plot really picked up, the acting's really good, the tension is the star of the movie, it just winds and it leaves you there until the end, and the end of this movie is awesome. The payoff is worth the slow burn. So for Dr. Sleep, I will say, go see this movie while it's in theaters. I don't know if I'm gonna watch this movie again, but I don't regret seeing it, especially since I got this free blanket. So Dr. Sleep, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.